Have you ever wanted to distill the magic of any piece of writing using AI? If so, I've created a killer prompt that does exactly that in seconds. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 10-step process that I came up with to extract and replicate the DNA of any document style and repurpose it as you wish. Whether you're a content creator, a marketer, or someone just looking to clone their brand voice and easily do so programmatically, this video is going to help you a lot. I had to spend hours basically relearning English to understand all the small mechanisms it takes to actually clone a document's structure and style. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mark, and I run my own AI automation agency called Prompt Advisors. We've been working with clients in every industry for the past 2 years, understanding where we can fit AI best in their workflows. Now, in a way, I had to learn what I'm about to show you the hard way, because we have a client that's been stuck on Microsoft Azure, and by extension has to use OpenAI models for pretty much everything, whether it's analysis or content generation. It just so happens that they love the new Claude models and how they sound, so they asked us whether or not they should actually adopt another cloud using AWS to be able to use these cloud models on top of their OpenAI models. We took that as a challenge and asked the question, what is it about Claude that you like? And the main thing was, we love the way it sounds, we love the rhythm, we love how human-like it is, and we love the tempo at which it writes. All of which are behaviors that we thought, okay, we could probably reverse engineer this. So what I'm about to show you is basically inspired by trying to reverse engineer how to make OpenAI sound like and speak like Claude. Alright, so that's more than enough talking, so let's dive right in and break this down. Alright, so what I want to do now is give you a very big picture idea of what we're trying to accomplish here in terms of the steps, and then we'll go into every single step of the prompt that I actually put together and understand bit by bit how does it all come together. The idea is that we give one or multiple documents, and these documents, contingent that they're uniform in their style, we can actually look through a series of different mechanisms and metrics and actually try to extract the underlying style, the registry, the pace, the tone, and you're going to see a ton of different elements of the English language that you might have forgot about for the past 10 years. Once we have all the bits and pieces that make up the DNA of this document, the idea is that we can take those, reverse engineer, and repurpose them to be able to write a new type of document using that exact same style and set of configurations that we've extracted. Now that we have an understanding of kind of what the goal is, the next step is to actually break this down into the multiple steps that actually make up my entire prompt. I'm going to show you all the 9 different factors that we're tracking and observing throughout the prompt. And the idea is right now you won't know what these mean. I didn't know what half of these meant before I went back and forth with ChatGPT asking it, what are the different mechanisms in the English language that would help me reverse engineer any structure, style of speech or writing sample. So we'll go through them really quickly, but don't get hung up on the words just yet. So we have contextual insight gathering, essence extraction, stylistic decomposition, linguistic nuance identification. If you're worried right now, don't get worried. We're going to break this down. Tonal mapping, structural blueprinting, directive synthesis, exemplar generation, and finally comparative evaluation, with the first 8 being the real core foundation of this. We'll go through each one by one now. First one, step 1, style extraction. We're not going to read the entire portion of the prompt here, but just as a general overview, the first part is extract the stylistic essence of a given text and generate a prompt to replicate its style. Follow the structure steps below to achieve this. Pay close attention to headers, subsection styles, and the way the source writing starts and ends stylistically. So here we're going to look at the target audience, primary purpose, the genre of the writing, and then an idea of the output. After that, we have step 2, which is essence extraction, which is pretty much looking for all the small things, kind of like the devils in the details, to understand what kind of pace do they use when they write, what is the type of tools and metaphors possibly that they use when they write this specific type of document, etc. Stylistic decomposition is really going down to the granular level. So this is where we're really focusing on the lexicon that they use. Do they use jargon? Do they not use jargon? Do they use colloquial words or slang? Do they have sentence structures that change quite a bit? Do we go from short to long, long to short, short to short? Pacing and rhythm especially something I didn't know was so important in understanding language. Motifs and themes. This is basically what kind of symbolism, thematic topics are used to actually try to articulate meaning through the writing. So now we'll tackle this one, which is linguistic nuance identification. This is going through different idioms, jargon. An idiom, for example, is something that you would use every day as a cliche in your native language. So in English, you'd say something like, you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. That's not actually meant literally, it's more of an analogy that you can get more people to help you or do what you want if you're nice to them. So this is kind of what this portion is trying to listen in for and detect. Next, tonal mapping. Emotional resonance is basically like, what is the general tone and the vibe of the actual text? Formality level, this is pretty straightforward. Is it informal, semi-formal, slightly formal? All of these things seem like they're very nitpicky, but instead of you having to prompt it yourself and saying, you know what, make it slightly less formal when it outputs something that you're not expecting, this tries to really get it right from the first time. The next is structural blueprinting. So I had no idea what this was. So this is idea arrangement. Basically, how are the ideas and the themes actually displayed and spread out structurally? Visual mapping is basically trying to understand how the piece of text tries to contextualize all of its thoughts and ideas. And the whole concept of a structural blueprint is actually understanding like how would you plan on writing in a structural way, very similar to the text you're being given. Similar to how you'd have a blueprint for a brand new house, where you know where the beams are, you know where you're going to put the bathrooms. Similar way in this case, it's like, where do we put these subheaders? Where do we put these sentences? Where do we put bullets if there are bullets? That kind of thing. And then we get to directive synthesis. So this one's also one of the more meta complicated ones. So actionable directives, which is translate the analysis into actionable steps for replication. So this is more an instruction for what the prompt is actually going to do. It's going to try to summarize how it should actually be emulating the style and speech of the actual text. And then it tries to develop a replication template. So it's going to try to give its own tips using the LLM to come up with additional things that I might have not even come up with or seen on what could be used to emulate and replicate this style. 2 more to go, and then we'll see an actual example of this at work. Okay, so this one is exemplar generation. This is not necessarily looking and using mechanisms in the English language to look for certain things. It's more so we're actually giving an instruction in the prompt to look for and generate sample texts that are similar to the ones that I just saw, and try to actually use direct quotes so that we can actually extract those. Because the whole goal of this, if you remember, is we just want to be able to extract everything and then be able to provide examples to the prompt that we're going to try to create to help us then use that prompt to generate whatever we want in that exact same style. So to do so, we have to give it examples. And in this case, this step is going to try to actually produce similar examples to what it's seeing in the text and document it. Really important here is this part here, which says specify whether the text should be in bullets, lists, bullet points, or numbered steps. ChatGPT, which is something you would have seen in one of my older videos, adores lists and bullets and numbered steps. So if you have some form of text that doesn't have that, and it's in long form format, which is honestly what Claude is really good at avoiding, that list and bulleted format, you want to be able to extract that and understand and tell the prompt, hey, you shouldn't be writing in bullets whatsoever. And the last one here, which is comparative evaluation, the whole point of this is actually to build on step 8, which is looking at the samples of text extracted and the ones we've generated to try to better understand how to actually recreate those examples of text. This does a comparative analysis between what it knows and the text that we've generated to make sure that they indeed actually match the original style and structure of the source text. So this step really brings everything together to prepare it for the most important step, which is actually creating the prompt. And this is the final step, which basically brings everything together, combines it, and creates a prompt using a technique we've been going over a lot on this channel called meta prompting. Now, I won't go through it right now. There are tons of videos you can watch from a few weeks ago to get yourself up to speed for this last part. But pretty much, we're basically going to tell the AI to tell itself to write a prompt that puts together all of the elements that we've extracted, including the examples, to create what's called a multi-shot prompt, which is again a prompt that has multiple examples for the prompt to actually do some monkey see, monkey do, understand all the examples, and be able to replicate them that way. Now, there's one more portion of this prompt here that I didn't put in the slide because it's pretty big. We're basically giving it at the very end as well an exemplary prompt to generate as a result of all of these elements so that it has something to build off of from case to case. This is the actual prompt in a text file. You can see we broke this down step by step here. This all comes together in step 10, like I showed you, and you'll see here example prompt. I won't go through it. This will be available for you in the description down below, so you can take a look at it, read it, go through each part, and obviously configure whatever you need for your use case. I'm definitely not saying it's going to be 100% effective no matter what text you give it, but at least you can build on top of my 10 to 15 hours of pure pain and make it work for your specific scenario. Real quick, we basically go through the introduction, the definition explanation, the components breakdown of everything we've extracted, the importance and benefits of anything that's stylistic, strategies, challenges and solutions, and a conclusion kind of going through all the different things here. And then we give example sections. So that's kind of in step 8 where we made those extractions of the text samples. We kind of inject them here as samples for how it should speak. So in this case, it's saying introduction. So what's the deal with discipline? It's trying to give the prompt some clues here that it should likely be writing rhetorical questions throughout the course of the actual text it's going to generate. And as you go down to the very bottom here, we're going to have our standard variable at the very bottom. If you haven't watched my other videos, we put this variable at the very bottom and we reference it somewhere in the actual underlying prompt so that it's really easy for us to update the topic of what we'll be writing about without having to actually rewrite parts of the prompt itself. As soon as you actually write a value here, it's going to automatically know anywhere else where you've referenced the word topic, which you do in the very beginning, should have this specific topic applied to, and it'll write about that topic without you doing too much work. Right now, we're actually going to put the pedal to the metal and give this prompt a shot. I've embedded it within a custom GPT, and all we're going to have to do is upload a PDF to that custom GPT when we click Analyze a Document, and it should be able to show you going through all of these steps and using meta prompting to create a prompt that summarizes all these steps in one shot that you can then copy, paste into another browser, toggle to see what topic you'd like to write about, and it should write it in that similar style to your input text. So this is the GPT that I put together, and all we have to do is go through the couple samples that I put together in Claude and try and see how it works when we try to actually emulate their different style and structure. Now the documents themselves are not very complicated, they just have slightly different styles from one another. So if we go to Claude Story 1 here, you'll see it's just an article about the impact of AI on the job market. And it basically has some subheaders, some other headers in here, and then it ends with a conclusion at the very bottom. And it's very title oriented and subsection oriented. So if we take that and we drop it into our GPT and use all the mechanisms that we've talked about to actually detect and extract that style, we should be able to write and replicate using the prompt that it's going to generate for. All right, so we're going to click on Analyze Document, and then it's going to prompt us to either upload or drag and drop the PDF that we're talking about. In my case, I already prepared it here. So we're just going to pull Claude Story 1 into the chat, and we're just going to submit it. And the beauty of this prompt is because we've made it so detailed, so bespoke, it's going to go through all the operations in one shot. So see here, it's going through step 1, step 2, step 3. So as it's generating, every single step that we talked about theoretically about the deck is actually being shown here more concretely. So when we go through this end to end, it'll be very clear what each step is taken care of and how the prompt at the very end is coming together. And if you go to the very end, now that it's finished generating, you can see a full prompt has been put together that basically summarizes everything that's been detected from the document that we just uploaded. Before we get into the prompt itself, let's go through the actual step 1 to step 9 and see what actually occurred when it came to analyzing this specific document that we saw before. So step 1 tried to identify the target audience, the primary purpose of this document, and it tries to classify the genre. In this case, it categorized it as nonfiction, specifically within the realm of technology and economics. For step 2, it went through and tried to do a review overall of the general essence of the document. So it talked about current trends, specific examples, emphasis on job displacement and creation, strategies for adaptation and practical advice. And then in here, you can see it says tools indicate a formal and informative style with a balanced tone. So these are the small different mechanisms that if you were writing the prompt yourself, you'd struggle a lot to come up with the words to even describe what that balance even looks like. For step 3, it's talking about the fact that it's predominantly complex and compound sentences. When it comes to the lexicon, which is basically like the way it uses its words, it's talking about terms related to AI and economics. When it came to pacing and rhythm, it's talking about it right in a moderate pace and logical flow. And then for themes and motifs, it's just saying pretty much we're talking about technology and economics, and that's the general vibe of the actual information. Step 4, the more complex one, talks about whether or not there's any metaphorical language, and it says it's limited. The same thing with idioms, which is basically, again, slang or cliche sentences, and pretty much that it's a clear and direct language-based document. Tonal mapping-wise is pretty short and sweet. It kind of reiterates what we talked about in step 1 and 2, which is that neutral and balanced tone, more formal than informal. In terms of the blueprint here, which is super interesting to look at, it talks about the different components of it, which is an introduction with the thesis statement, some context, some explanation of current trends and examples, and then it goes through a few other sections that it goes through and basically summarizes what the skeleton of this information in this document looks like. Directive synthesis kind of echoes what was said in step 6, except it says something a bit more detailed here, which is it concludes with a summary and a call to action. So that's really important, especially if you want to replicate a document that has some form of CTA or some form of final thought that you want to be able to resonate with and write in the exact same style of. For exemplar generation, it's pretty much doing what we talked about before, which is basically going through the document, curating certain samples, and trying to recreate versions of those samples so that it can better understand how to actually emulate this style of writing as best as it can, using that monkey see, monkey do method. Step 9, in a way, is kind of preparing the prompt for what it's going to write about, making sure that what it's going to write is going to match the source style of the document that we've uploaded. And this is pretty much a warm-up to the prompt that's going to be put together using our meta prompting instruction and the prompt, which we'll get to right now. So we'll just copy this prompt here and put it into a brand new document, just to better take a look at it. And if we take a look here, it says you are an expert in writing analytical and informative articles on the impact of technology on various sectors. Your task is to write a comprehensive article about topic, a variable, that we're going to denote at the very end of the actual prompt, following the structured and engaging style outlined below. So then it goes through each section, it goes through the introduction, what it should look like, and you'll see here the mention of that concise thesis statement that we saw before, the historical context, the current trends section, the potential for new developments, etc. Pretty much everything that we saw in that blueprint, step 6. For the example sections, this is where we're embedding those samples, I believe in step 8, that we've extracted in the exemplar generation portion to feed it as a multi-shot prompt. And at the very bottom here, it talks about how we're going to end it off. We're going to have a conclusion. And the final section here, which is the conclusion, is basically saying we're going to end it off in an engaging way. And we're going to set up this topic with a blank value so that you can now take this, copy it into a brand new chat, which is what we're going to do, and just emulate it to see will it write in a very similar style to our source document. So if we actually take this, copy it, and paste it in a brand new chat here, let's set the document to something like talking about the impact of AI in the restaurant industry. You see here, it starts off with that big title, that introduction, that it calls introduction. It breaks down historical context, current trends. It writes in long form. Again, remember, the default of GPT is to always write in bullets and numbered lists. So the fact that it's emulating that long form style without us having to actually drill it to remember that shows us that it's actually trying to replicate that blueprint that we're feeding it. So you can see here, it's going through all those sections as we talked about, ending the conclusion with conclusion, which you can obviously configure in the underlying prompt to make sure it's maybe more of a conversational heading or conversational conclusion heading. And you can see here, it has that CTA that we talked about and we mentioned during that extraction phase where it says to stay ahead, stakeholders must prioritize continuous learning, data-driven decision-making, and willingness to explore new technology frontiers. So a decent CTA similar to that source document. Just for fun, we'll try one more document just to make sure it actually works and that this wasn't a fluke. So we'll try Cloud Story 2, which is slightly different, where it's talking about some form of murder mystery story, and it's basically like back and forth dialogue in quotes, kind of like a screenplay. So if we take this document and then we say, so let's try another document, let's add another document, see attached, and we'll just take the second file here, drop it, click enter, and now it's done running, and it pretty much did a better job than the first time. I think because the document is more rich in terms of its style and technique, And I won't go through it exhaustively like we did the first time, but pretty much real quick highlights is it's good at detecting that it has to be engaging, suspenseful, and descriptive. And then the genre is crime fiction. And as you go down, the stylistic decomposition is saying mixture of simple, compound, and complex sentences. So very different from the original document, which is more plain Jane. And again, as you go down, you'll see it's saying that suspenseful and intriguing tone over and over again. It's breaking down the blueprint in a very different way and actually saying rising action with plot twists. So it's really understanding that and distilling that information in that one sentence, which will be super helpful for the underlying meta prompt. And at the very end here, we have this prompt. We'll take it and we'll paste it here again. And you'll see the difference between this one and the last one. The most important part here is you are an expert in writing engaging and suspenseful detective fiction. Your task is to write a compelling story about topic, which we can set below. So if we just take this bad boy, open a new chat, put it at the bottom, and let's say a ghost that haunts someone using ChatGPT wrong. And as you'll see here, it's actually put together a story very similar with that same type of discourse back and forth, broken down into sections with plot twists and a rise in action. Obviously, it's labeling it here. We could write in the prompt, make sure you don't actually label it, just do it. But the fact that it's actually remembering that blueprint and breaking it down in that same way with this final resolution portion. And now we know that the first one wasn't a fluke, and you could probably replicate this for all kinds of documents, whether it be formal reports, styles of writing emails, or even writing a poem. This technique, obviously, you can build on and improve on, but at the very least, this can act as a foundation for you to be able to build on top of it, mix and match, see what works, and even maybe blend different writing styles to create a brand new novel one. In the same way how we talked about we could combine different personas in my AI meta prompting personas video and see how we could generate a brand new voice that's composed of multiple celebrities or well-known figures' voices. I know this is more complex than my usual tutorials, but I wanted to show you behind the curtain of some of our more complex projects here at Prompt Advisors. So maybe you can use something like this and really step up your custom GPT game, your Claude project game, or whatever use case or application you're using it to try and actually extract the tonality and style of the writing you love and be able to actually integrate it into your own workflows as soon as possible. As usual, if you find this helpful, leave a like and please sub to the channel. Would super appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.